warm thanks to Dr. Arvizu for setting the stage for our event today. Now, before I introduce our keynote speaker, I would like to take a moment for some housekeeping. Though we will have some time set aside this morning for visiting exhibitors, please feel free to attend the expo hall during any part of today's event. We have some great exhibitors with a wealth of information and knowledge, and they would like to speak to each and every one of you. Simply visit their booth, find one of their representatives, and schedule a meeting to learn more about what they do. Now, it is my great pleasure to welcome your keynote speaker to the stage, John Williams, Director of Innovation and Technology for the Office of Investment and Innovation within the U.S. Small Business Administration. Mr. Williams' primary responsibility is to serve as Senior Principal for the Federal Policy Implementation and Programmatic Oversight of the SBIR and STTR programs across all 11 participating agencies. Now, prior to joining the SBA in December 2014, Mr. Williams served as the Director of the Navy SBIR and STTR programs. While at the Navy, Mr. Williams conceptualized the Transition Assistance Program, which is an 11-month program to educate and assist Navy Phase 2 awardees in the technology transition process. Commercialization of technologies developed under the SBIR and STTR programs was a major focus of his work. Through Mr. Williams' leadership, the Navy led the way in supporting the acquisition and transition of SBIR and STTR seeded technologies, awarding more Phase 3 contracts than the rest of the DoD combined. His career with the Navy spanned 27 years, including positions at the Naval Surface Warfare Center, the Naval Sea Systems Command, and the Office of Naval Research. John, I now turn the stage over to you.
Thanks, Garrett. Appreciate that. Joe, you're going to run the slides for us? There you go. All right, so my name is John Williams. I am, as you've heard, the Director of Innovation. Basically, I work at SBA and run a couple programs over there. So one of the ones we're really going to focus on is America's Seed Fund, often termed SBIR, STTR. We're trying to move away from acronyms there, but those all one and the same programs. We're going to talk about those, why they're of value. I'm going to give a lot of insight that's going to be more geared towards new companies coming on board and learning about the program, but available for any questions that can be taken care of in the chat. And we have 45 minutes, so hopefully we'll get some questions in there because I really want to address the questions specific to what you're interested in hearing. Go ahead, Del, next slide, please. Del? Hey, Del, I'm seeing the same. Yeah.
You should have a left and right on the thing you have there.
I'm not seeing a left and right.
Okay. Give me 1 second then.
Yeah, I'm even trying to, because I don't even see the full screen or the bottom of it. Let me do something real quick. Yeah, I don't see a left and right.
Okay, stand by 1 second. Give me just about 45 seconds to get that set up for you, John.
All right, so while Dell's flipping the next slide, we're going to talk about SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research Program, STTR, Small Business Technology Transfer Program. We're going to go into the agencies and how they're different, but also how topics are different. I'm going to dig into a bit into the difference of an agency that mainly does contracts as opposed to those that mainly do grants. And there is a big difference, and that's one of the important things to kind of know going down the path as you look at topics and you apply to them. Granting agencies are very open. They're looking for ideas from the individual, and it's very broad on what they'll fund, where a contracting agency has a need. Typically, they are the buyer of the technology that's going to be developed, so they have a really specific need, and they want you to develop technology to do just that. And so you really don't have as much of a berth on what your technology is going to move towards, but you have a lot of berth on what research, what capabilities you're going to bring to do that, what kind of research, the process of how you're going to get there. But their need is going to be well-defined, process not as well-defined. In the first couple of slides, basically we talk about why do we have an SBIR program. And the SBIR program is set up to establish a vehicle for the federal government to put money towards R&D tech small businesses. So this is definitely a tech program, definitely funds R&D. It doesn't buy, it's not an IT type program. If you have technology already developed, it doesn't further develop that. It's really cutting edge technology being developed by early stage innovators, and typically in places that venture capital would not fund. We are not trying to duplicate what venture capital is funding. We're really trying to focus on what they would not be funding. And so that, it's in those areas. So you'll see topics along those lines. But basically back in 1982, well, prior to that, federal government or the Congress realized the federal government was pushing most of the money in R&D to either large universities, large companies, whether it's the defense primes, whether it's the Bell Labs, but very little was getting into and going towards small tech firms. And so by establishing this kind of carve out of 3.2% of their R&D funding that an agency would normally contract out, this required them to spend that with small businesses. And by definition in SBIR, what a small business is slightly different than some of the definitions used by the Small Business Administration. So Dale, you got my slide yet, or you're still working on it? Or?
You should see them on
I
your
don't.
now.
Is there a different screen I'm looking at? I see the on stage.
Okay. No, I have your slides up. I'm on slide 2.
All right, that's gonna make it trickier. Let me pull it up over here. Sorry, folks. This software, the government tools aren't as always friendly to different versions of software. All right. All right, I'm going to pull it up on another screen so I can kind of see what you're at. All right. So America's Seed Fund, yeah. So the biggest thing about America's Seed Fund is that it's non-dilutive. Basically, the companies keep the IP, the intellectual property developed under it. Government can use it. And so again, that would be more the contracting agencies will use the technology, but normally to use it, they'll have follow-on contracts, which we'll call phase 3 contracts, and you'll see terminology on that to further develop it and use it for their resource. So let's go to slide 3. And so that should be America's Seed Fund coordinated, right? All right, we're on the same page. Then I'll start just going the numbers. All right, so my role in this office is manage the oversight. So SBA under this program doesn't fund or provide any money directly to the small businesses. It's all provided by these 11 participating agencies that I'll talk about, but none of it comes from those from SBA directly. So and so what we do is we monitor the agencies, make sure they are applying the money. If there's problems and challenges in it, we report up to Congress. We work with the small businesses and the agencies on issues. But we're really also, our 2 other major programs are trying to provide support to groups that support you. So the New Mexico Arrowhead FAST organization is a FAST awardee. You can click on either of those links to look at our FAST awardees and our growth accelerators. But FAST awardees are now in 44 states, and their whole job is to help entrepreneurs with the SBIR and STTR program. So one of the best things you can do is find out right away who that is in your state and start to leverage, reach out to them and see what kind of support they provide. Often there's a number of programs and opportunities within the state that you may not be aware of, additional resources and funding to help you develop the proposal. And those are all the FAST awardees, the best person to reach out to find about more information on that. So that's the big role that we have, is really trying to push forward this program and make sure we have outreach to especially underrepresented groups that aren't understanding or aware of this program. All right, slide 4. So really, how big is the program? A little over $4 billion a year across these 11 agencies. Fund about 4,000 companies, about 7,000 projects are funded each year. And again, key thing is this is an investment. We're not taking an equity stake in the companies. And so this is a zero equity type program, but again, also doesn't really duplicate a lot of the research areas that maybe a venture capital would. All right, slide 5. I think I hit most of this, developed in 82, really designed to fund major improvements. So not designed for minor improvements, late stage productization, not for equipment, but really first of a kind cutting edge technologies. I think that's important to know what it's not for as much as it is for, because it's not worth your time if you don't really fall into that right window. And again, reaching out to some of the presenters from the agencies, but as well, some of the your fast awardees can help you through that. So slide 6, Dale. So why should you care about SBIR program? You know, as we all know, STEM affects every aspect of our life. Developing technologies was really important. Again, we don't really compete, but even venture capital there's a lot of venture capital out there, but it is really limited in IT, healthcare, and certain sectors. So we're really typically funding what more term deep tech, but material research, things that's going to take 5-10 years to develop. Now that's not across the board in a statement, but it is a lot of those kind of things that it's really that seed that's pre-venture capital that will get you into those programs and that non-dilutive. Slide 7, just to highlight, program's been around since 82, funded some very, very large companies that were small then. And most of the money in these companies listed, this was the seed money that started these companies. But also in industries. So US biotech industry, 11 of the 15 top biotech firms had their money early stages in SBIR awardees. So program, great return on investment, does a lot for the nation, and an important program. Slide 8. So touched on this, but again, why is it such a great program? It's non-dilutive. You're not giving up an equity stake in your company. And again, we're typically funding you at a stage early enough where your IP and the value of it is hard to determine because you haven't done enough research and validation to prove what it can do. So that's the last time, that's the worst time to really give equity away. So you'll build up capability, you'll build up and validate technology if you are going to go after other money. Maintain the data rights within the firm, funds work that others, that others don't typically fund, and there's follow-on awards, which I'm going to hit in the next slide on slide 9. So the program, you'll hear agencies talk about phase 1, phase 2, a little bit on phase 3. The phase 1 and the phase 2 funding elements are what is provided with the set aside. So each agency has to take how much their extramural R&D is. They'll take 3.2% of that and 0.45% of that and put it into a pot for SBIR and STTR, and then they'll fund awards phase 1s and 2s. It's a phase program, and I even have phase 0 here because phase 0 is basically the concept of helping you develop a proposal. Some agencies actually have phase 0 programs where they're trying to train and bring people in. SBA's kind of fast awards are phase 0 like programs. The effort for those organizations is to help bring you along. But then the phase 1 is actually a contract or grant you will get with that agency. Typically runs 6 to 12 months, up to $250,000. But some agencies like NIH typically go above that level. The 1.7, again, agencies and more the NIH, but agencies can go above that for waivers. So these are, but some agencies that are smaller are going to actually award different amounts. That will all be laid out in the solicitation. Understand there'll be gaps between phase 1 and phase 2. You'll want to work once you get a phase 1 with that agency to understand the steps in getting the phase 2. But the program, one of the challenges with small companies that are totally relying on this program is there will be gaps in the program. You may not get the phase 2. It isn't always, sometimes it's multiple phase 1s before you break into a phase 2. Some companies over time will have multiple awards going on that feed off of each other. All is allowable, but make sure you understand that where the funding sources are going to come. These are typically 6 months to 1 year phase 1s and typically 2 year phase 2s. Based on that, the program allows sole source direct awards to any company that has won a phase 1 and phase 2. Now, again, this is going to mainly be those contracting agencies, mainly the DoD, that wants your technology. And so they're able to not have to go back out and recompete for the technology you develop that addresses one of their needs. They can go directly to you as a company and negotiate a follow-on contract of any size and as many of them. So there's no limit on the dollar amount of a phase 3 or how many phase 3s an organization can get. So go ahead, Dale, let's hit slide 10 real quick. We're going to fly over that. So again, 3.2%, about 3.5 billion, 500 million, been over that. Slide 11. So don't get too hung up on SBIR and STTR. We can dig into that more, but STTR requires that you subcontract. So still the contract is with, or grant is with the small business, but it requires you to work with a nonprofit research institution. Many times that is a university, but there are other nonprofits, research institutions that you can apply to. So it's a minimum of 40% to the small business, 30% to that research institution, and the other 30% can go to a totally different group, to many groups, or split among those two organizations. With SBIR, you can't subcontract any more than 33% of the phase 1 and 50% of the phase 2. In theory, the concept was that STTR was more about transitioning technology from universities and transitioning it to a small business and commercializing it. In reality, we see a lot of university engagement on SBIRs, and it's a much bigger program. So that doesn't really happen quite that way. Dale, let's go to the next, which slide 12. So eligibility, basically U.S. owned and operated, under 500 people, work done in the U.S. Startups, it's both for startups and established companies. It doesn't matter how long you've been around, but the work is focused on performing the R&D. So we're not purchasing equipment, as I talked about, and so it's really for technical work. So that's the eligibility. Slide 13 really does fund across the board because you have certain organizations, National Science Foundation, which really funds all types of areas of research. But again, with the focus on how it's going to commercialize, what's the business model that you're going after, how are you going to have a market, NIH, everything health, but DoD across the board funds things in health and energy and all sorts of things. So all these areas are covered. These are the participating agencies. The term market-driven and mission-driven. Mission-driven is those that are contract-focused. So those organizations have a use and a need for your technology, and they're going to do the contract. The other ones, Department of Energy is very interested in reducing the cost of energy, and they're looking for your ideas on how you would best do that. They still have topics in advanced batteries and specific things, but the buckets are bigger. And so often if you're working in the energy space, you'll be able to definitely work within the DOE, probably NSF almost for sure, probably DoD. So lots of opportunities depending on what you're working on. With the market-driven ones, they want you to figure out what your market is and where you're going, and they're not going to, so it's pretty open on that side, and you're going to be the one that's going to tell them, this is the market we're after, this is why we think we'd be competitive, this is how we're going to commercialize that. Wherein the mission-driven contracting side, they'll basically say, hey, we're the market. So they want, ideally, you to have another market, private sector, but they'll be the ones, this is where we're going to use your technology, and it needs to feed into this system. Most of my time in the Department of Defense, Department of Navy. So we had a need when we needed that company to develop this technology or prove it did or did not work within a certain window so that we could then transition it into an acquisition program. Typically, these were 10-year kind of life cycles of getting from idea to actually to where it's produced in a first article almost. Just real quick on slide 15, this is the dollar amount for FY22. So over almost 4.4 billion in these areas. This is how the agencies work out. So I think some important skills, slide 16, that when you write a proposal, really think, is this innovative? Do you understand what that agency needs? Again, really important here is the granting agency, contracting agency. Develop the plan on how you're going to develop that. Building the business case is really important. So even in the DoD side, how are you going to get that into the weapon, the product, to the members of the service that you want to get it to? So there needs to be a strategy on how you as a business would do that. Understanding the guidelines. So there's going to be solicitations that are rather extensive, but they'll provide all the details and information on what they're looking for in that application. Again, there's multiple registrations. These are places really your fast awardees can help a lot because they've seen many companies go through that, and they can kind of walk you through some of those things. Let's hit slide 17 real quick. So again, I think it's important that you think about it as a product. Now, it could be software, but really you are building something that's going to be used in some way, shape, or form. And so it's research for a purpose. It's not just advancing research. So kind of understanding who the end customer is, having a good knowledge of what they want, how much they pay for it, how big it's got to be, the life cycle on it. And doing some of those things is really important to make sure you're putting forward a proposal that will be enticing to them. If you don't have that in there, you're not going to get funding most likely. The next one on 18. So again, the product, based on technical innovation. So we're looking for advances in science that will feed into a product. There needs to be some risk. We're not, just funding an evolution of technology that's moved along. That would not be kind of risk-focused R&D, which this is. And again, commercializing that, which could be either to the mission agency to get it, to NASA, get it to DoD, or to get it to the private sector, benefiting health, benefiting, other parts of the military. So there are a lot of agency difference and now the topics that come out, what their focus areas in R&D, when they put them out. Do they go out once a year? Do they go out many times a year? How much money is on a phase 1 and phase 2? Those are all things that, the more you know about, the better off, and you can kind of narrow down what agency is best for you. I'm going to kind of push through some of that. So again, I've got more on this contracting versus grants. These slides will be available to you. Again, as I kind of talked about, these contracting agencies, they know what they're requiring, what they're looking for. It's more focused, and they have a product in use available. I planned for it. And then with those that are more in the granting agency, really that's an investigator initiates the idea, the approach, but in the broad area of energy, in the broad area of health, your topics will fit, and they'll have buckets within there that you'll apply to. Slide 21. So again, contracting, you will be able to talk to the topic authors generally, but those topics don't repeat. So a granting agency, you can go out and see their topics. They will almost be exact, if not exact, for many years sometimes, because it's, again, themes and areas and big buckets. Under the contracting side, you may see a topic. You should often only see a topic once. They've then developing and working on that and moving forward. So I can get to some questions. We're going to move along a little bit. All right, so slide 24. Wait, I think I skipped too far there. All right, yeah, slide 23. So again, granting agencies, let's go to slide 24. So granting agencies are not going to buy your product. Their goal is to basically on phase 1, you've got this advancement and idea that you're going to prove out. Again, it's not 100% on all wars, but basically, it's kind of considered more of a proof of concept phase. And then in phase 2, they're really looking for you to develop some products and prototypes and things like that to really prove the technology would work in a prototype, but also really understand what that market is, what the need is. So I-Core is a program. There's other programs that kind of do customer discovery. Those are all important things to do, to have partners in some of these, because if you're developing a product and you're a 5-man company, and you need manufacturing capability, you need to present to us how you are going to scale that. And some of that needs to be discussed in the phase 1 and certainly in the phase 2 proposal. So those are all important aspects of submitting strong and winning proposals. So granting agencies, so I think I covered, but in contracting agencies, you'll see something often with them that there'll be a pre-solicitation timeframe where you'll be able to talk to the topic authors. And then once the topic is officially out, it's different, it's controlled. So the DoD still has a way you can email, but those emails are shared anyone that's interested in the topic. As in a granting agency, they're more able to talk to submitters right up to the time you're submitting. So some of them have different processes for that, where you might submit a 1-page, a 2-page paper, you'll get some feedback whether, yeah, this is in line, this makes sense. They are trying to, again, narrow down people that either propose whether it's unlikely that that SBIR would fund it, or to really narrow it down in an area that, hey, technology-wise, you're not there, or that's not an interest area, maybe you should try another agency. Those are all things that we're trying to do kind of in that earlier phase. And there's different programs, and they'll tell you about those, and you can find them on their websites. But you can also talk to some of their individual program managers to really kind of, and that's really strongly advised. Again, some of your fast awardees will be able to help you through that, but they all have kind of different tools to do that. But I think it's important as you build up understanding the requirements of that proposal, the need by that agency. If they're going to use technology in a contracting agency, do you really understand the platform it's going on, who controls some of those decisions, learning some of the terminology that they use are going to be key things to understand from their perspective when they're evaluating you, that, yeah, this is something that this company gets. They understand how we work. They understand what the market is. And again, for a granting agency, that you've done some of that homework as part of that early phase 1 proposal. What I like to push people towards, slide 26, is, how do you first start out? How do you find what agencies are right? How do you find out if these are the types of things of the work that I do that get funded? And so I always say first start looking at past awards. And so on this slide here, this is our SBIR.gov website that SBA handles. And so there's a place where you can search awards. And then as you do that, you can type in keywords. And from that, basically, you'll get the list. So in this poll, I think this is the general poll for all awards. There's about 190,000 awards in this database now, but you can type in some keywords that you work on. You'll start to see what was funded, but then also the agency and when it was funded. So if I was doing these searches, I would look only in the last 3 years. I try to understand who's funding what in what area that aligns with what I do. I start to then narrow down those agencies and then who the players are in that agency. Again, if it's a contracting agency and they funded this in the past 3 years, maybe there's less of a chance they're going to fund it again, but you'll at least have an understanding of who works in what space and what they're trying to advance. So, who are the groups that work on advanced engine designs and materials for engines? Who are the ones that, might work on radar? You'll start to get a feel for what agencies, components, labs within those DoD organizations, for example, are the players in this space. That's important to understand. And in the granting agencies, again, their topics will come out every year. So you'll understand who's funded what. Is this something that we work in and fits in the bucket? And then really digging deep into that agency, understanding when that solicitation comes out. Do they have, like NSF and NIH, have multiple solicitations that are almost open year round with different closing dates? So you want to then start to understand that, so you can start to lay out the roadmap of building that first proposal. Especially, it takes, I think you really want 90 days to, as a minimum, to really, from the time you're figured out and you're going forward, to being able to really build that proposal to submit it in time. So I think also learning and asking for debriefs. So, many times the first proposals aren't successful, understanding why they aren't. Again, I'm going to push fast in some of the groups like Dell's app, because they've seen lots and lots of unsuccessful and successful proposals. They'll be able to provide that input before you submit it on what are the areas where you're really not covering that you need to cover, or where it's weak or where it's strong. Next slide then just shows, once you kind of get that flavor, slide 27, on what are the agencies, you want to make sure, and then I always start to recommend, if it's a granting agency, you kind of know when that topic's going to come out, so you're really set for it. You set your timer, your calendar for they come out on November 1st every year. So that's my next solicitation. And so you're digging in early and fast. And the same then with DoD. Sometimes even within the DoD, there's 13 different organizations, Army, Navy, Air Force, MDA, and others, and knowing when they come out with individual topics, because the DoD may come out with 3 or 4 solicitations a year, but the Navy may come out with less. And so understanding that there are organizations within the DoD like AFWERX, now Air Force, and they have really broad topics. And there are other agencies within the DoD that don't have as many broad topics. So having some of that nuance, experience, and understanding just helps you know that, hey, these are groups I really want to focus on. These would be a good entry point, because especially with those that we're calling mission contracting organizations, part of that goal of that phase 1 and phase 2 is to get in there and really understand who that agency is, prove to them that you're responsive, you've got great research, you've got great facilities and capabilities and individuals that are running that research, and you're going to continue to build that expertise out. And you'll, like I say, from my experience, it was very rare in the DoD that one phase 1 to phase 2, and then a massive phase 3. It's usually over time developing capability and expertise that then is mature enough for the DoD to rely on the company. And as one of my old program managers used to say, this is kind of a program that, especially in the DoD, my experience was that we're trying out, developing that relationship with the companies, and over time, understanding how they can respond and what their capabilities are. And then the beauty is with that phase 3 capability, that agency, that individual, that program can go directly to the company and say, okay, I know you guys can do all these things. We developed some of it. Now I want 70 prototypes that I can use here, here, and here, or products, or whatever they want in phase 3. Let's hit 28. So just going to touch on this a little bit, but it's, so we had a pretty rough reauthorization. The program has been around for 40 years and highly acclaimed across the world, really, and in every report. But the way it's written is it expires after a set period. It used to be 8 years, 4 years. So the program was set to expire on September 30th of 2022. So the same day we got a new signed bill out. So the president signed the bill on 30th September. So that extended the program for 3 years. So that doesn't mean the program is going away in 3 years. Again, this is the natural process, the painful one, but it's a natural process of the program. And part of the reason is let's continue to tweak the program. How can we make improvements in it that adapts to the changes? And so the biggest 2 changes in the new legislation was on due diligence, and basically the concern of foreign investment, foreign engagement, foreign control of technologies, especially those critical to the defense establishment, to national security. So there'll be additional questions I've got later that you'll start to see, and different additional requirements on the agencies to perform due diligence. So you'll see much higher levels of due diligence, Department of Energy, Department of Defense, especially, and less at a USDA and other places where technology being developed isn't a risk to national security as much. So this is really focused on that. And so, so there's going to be requirements on ties to what we call foreign countries of concern, you'll see there, which is Korea, China, Iran, current countries right now that from a national security standpoint, the government, the U.S. has concerns over people from those countries being involved. There'll be some more reporting. There's a new requirement. The Department of Defense has to have an open topic in each one of the subcomponents, the Army, Navy, Air Force, MDA and stuff. So you'll see that come on. And then there's an increase in, there are companies that have won multiple awards over time, and you'll start to see, so there's always been a requirement of, if you get X phase 1s, you have to at least get, so the old was for every 4 phase 1s you get, you have to have at least 1 phase 2. Those standards, based on how many awards you've had in the past, go up. And so we're now looking at, 2 to 1 and things like that, and the same on commercializing. So those are the big changes that were made. I think in my slide, yeah, this is kind of those areas. I probably could have skipped the last one there, but again, those are the areas, we extended the program, foreign influence and things like that. Slide 30, Dale, these are actually, so what you'll start to see is new questions that are part of your submission that are required for you to disclose. And these are the 7 questions, not written. They'll be expanded from this, but basically these are the questions. They're really trying to understand if you as a company had any relations or have businesses with foreign countries. They're most concerned, again, about the countries of concern, but you'll have to report on other countries. So if you're not doing work, you haven't taken money from other countries of concern or any foreign countries, this will all be no. If you've had some of that, you may have some yeses towards, you develop your business and you're selling some of your product to even Germany and things like that. You just have to report it. And then part of the evaluation does that provide a risk to national security? And so it could be a potential not to award, but again, it has to be something that we determine with you that there's a risk. So you're going to start to see those questions coming up. Actually, the Department of Energy already posted their questions, and the other agencies are doing that as we speak. So over the next 3 months, you'll see that rolling out with all of them. I think we'll just skip over this to get to questions. We won't have even much time for that, but these are some more slides on kind of, again, it's a risk-based approach, so it's not going to be the same at USDA as it will be DoD. What I do want to highlight, kind of closing, is we have on SBIR.gov a bunch of online tutorials where you can find out about each agency, how intellectual property is handled, what the phases of the program are, what these data rights I talk about mean, insight into each of those agencies to help you get a better understanding of what they do. So there's 55 of those, Dale 33. Again, I've mentioned there's 44 FAST, so almost, most states now have a FAST organization. Love to get it, and hopefully we'll get it to all. Oh, actually, this is the old one, 33. So I was wondering, there's many more states, so I'm sorry, this is my old slide. So now there's 44 of them, but if you go to SBIR.gov FAST, many of the states, now we only have 5 left. So there's 43 states actually, and Puerto Rico. So that's an important resource, and I think that's all I had. So Del, any questions from the community?
Yes, John, we actually do. So you kind of touched on this very briefly in the last couple of slides there, but one of the questions that we had that came in from the chat was, so, the congressional report says that the success rate for first-time awardees is, roughly 19%. What efforts are underway to increase that percentage of success?
None. 19 is a pretty good number. So when I say that, again, that's not, so the reason it's 19%, and it varies at different organizations across agencies, our job is to make every proposal better, but that just drives the competition. So you have X amount of money and X amount of proposals going in, and it's ranged then between, I think, as low as 15% to higher than that. So what you find is if there's an economic downturn, our numbers tend to go down because we get higher proposals. But again, our focus isn't on that 19% or what that number is. It's trying to help first timers win awards. So what is interesting is over the last couple of years, about 40 to 44% of the awards made in phase 1 were companies that had never received an award before. So that's my big drive, is how do I get more companies trained, educated, and to write strong and winning proposals. Yep, next.
Excellent. And this was touched on a little bit briefly, but question, why did reauthorization change the commercialization requirements and kind of thresholds? And what does that mean for new awardees?
It means nothing for new awardees. So those rules are based on companies that have over 50 phase 2 awards. So, and actually, there's different levels of bars. So companies that have had 15 in the last 5 years, so there's different bars, but these are for multi-award winners. We want to make sure multi-award winners are commercialized. It looks over a 10-year window. And so, the idea is if there's companies that have been funded year over year over year, which there have been, are they transitioning and getting other dollars outside of SBIR? So it won't impact new awardees. Next.
Great. And so do you see the due diligence checks that you were just talking about slowing down the time to award?
Unfortunately, I'm concerned that they will, yes. But the agencies are working hard on how to do that in a parallel path. They're looking at, when do they do that? Again, some are going to do it on all the proposals as they come in. Others are going to do it as those proposals are selected. So you'll see some differences, but any added step has the potential to slow things down. But all the agencies are working really hard to try to put those as parallel processes and to not slow things down.
Gotcha. And another question here for you. You mentioned when you talked about the reauthorization and like the open innovation topics that the different DoD components are going to have to put into effect. Do you think those are a good thing? And, if so, why or why not?
Pros and cons to it. So I think they're a good thing for so there's some relatively small DoD components with, $5 million to spend. I think for those, that's kind of tricky because they're going to get proposals all over the map. And so if I were a company and I was proposing on an open topic, I would more focus on agencies like MDA, Navy, Army, Air Force, the bigger ones where it's really defined and you have it. But my fear could be is you'll get, the percent will go down even more because you'll get so many people propose under that aren't hitting the mark. So it'll be interesting to find out, and we're going to have a GA report that's going to study the value of that. The advantage is, and I had an open topic when I was at Navy, but it was open on manufacturing, was we get ideas that we didn't think about. So you get some interesting ideas that come in that are really game changers. So there's definitely pros and cons.
Okay. And another question here, kind of based off of something that is, I don't know, percolated or come out very recently with the announcement of the kind of newly formed Office of Strategic Capital. Do you think that that's going to influence the way the SBIR and STTR programs operate? Do you think they can be leveraged together for better commercial prospects for innovative tech?
So certainly the goal is to leverage them for better commercials. Well, yeah, and transition and things like that. So the individual that's heading up that organization was from AFWorks. The program has connection with us at SBA, so we've been involved with working with the development of that office, but it's also using the other side of my office, which is SBIC, which is a program that provides money to venture capital type organizations. And so the push is to do that in areas that provide advanced capability for the Department of Defense in areas, hypersonics, materials, and things that just not enough investment was going on. So with SBIR, it is limited. Again, it's next stage research, but it can only go so far. And in some places, you prove something out. Now you need to set up a manufacturing line. You need costs that typically couldn't be funded by or can't be funded by federal money. This concept could be bringing in private investment that could do that. So this is not all about, but certainly a lot about helping over that valley of death in a very focused way by the DoD that will rely more on non-traditional defense contractors, new businesses, commercial, and all that to really mature things and address their needs. So I think, yes, it's a very good thing.
Okay. And
more to come on it because it's just getting stood up, and how it'll impact SBIR, I think, will be something we'll watch.
Great. Now, you kind of mentioned that the NMFAST program does a lot of assistance and helps people, and we oftentimes deal with people that look at SBIR and STTR almost like a mythbuster style. There are things that we always have to kind of correct people on. A big one that people really kind of take to heart is these programs seem too good to be true. The government doesn't take equity. You don't have to pay the money back, etc. What's the government goal in this? Why do they do this?
So government goal is I mean, it's all true. It's not too good, well, but again, government always is looking, especially the U.S., and how do you bring along technology, especially because everyone, the argument is, oh, you got all this venture capital money. Reality is venture capital funds very focused companies at very later stages. They want to see returns in 3 to 5 years. We're looking at much longer term tech. So, why I, said that, main companies in the biotech industry really started with SBIR. We're seeing things and investing in things that we know will grow, and that generates jobs, high-paying jobs, taxes, advances the U.S. And so that's why the program is so important, is to make sure that federal funding is going to as many great ideas as possible. And why we at SBA push the program in FAST and other places is we know good ideas just don't come from white males in California and Boston. And we want to make sure, okay, what are we doing to reach out to the smartest people out there with these great ideas, making them aware of the program and getting them to apply so that we can provide that seed money to get that technology to mature to a stage where they can either go it on their own or other investors will engage. Too good to be true.
And kind of a curveball for you, because this is always, I think, a fun question for people to hear, particularly from people that are so ingrained into the innovation ecosystem. But, just personally, for John Williams, what's your favorite thing about the SBIR and STTR programs?
So it was more when I was in Navy, and it was working individually with the companies and really, hands-on and trying to work with them to solve their problems and finding those additional resources, going to the companies and working with the entrepreneurs. But at SBA, it's exciting. It's just been, I don't think this is a shocker, but Congress has been a little challenging, influential, and so but I love working with policy to really provide things that make a difference to bring on underrepresented. So I'm really focused on what can we do. I don't think we're getting enough resources. I'm really happy that FAST and Growth Accelerator have almost doubled in the last couple of years. But I know we should be doing more to really help all those bright minds have access to this federal funding, and that's real important. And that drives me right now.
Great, and I think that's going to finish us up for the Q&A.
Yeah.
So thank you, John.
I appreciate it. Send my slides to whoever wants them.
Yep.
Thanks for all you do, Dal. Appreciate it.
Thanks again, John. Those are some great remarks, and that keynote was wonderful and really helped set the tone for today.